Hey friends, welcome to the Canyon Pathways podcast, where we invite you to live like a son and lead like a father. Canyon Pathways is a global community of men on the journey from the striving of servanthood to the freedom of sonship as we traverse the canyon that is midlife leadership. My name is Noel Bouché, and I'm the founder and part of the leadership team for this venture, and I'll be your guide throughout this podcast as we explore and discover what it means to live like a son so we can lead like a compassionate father. Great to be with you and eager for this episode to share some insights and revelations as we journey together. And we got a conversation a little bit later on with my friend Fred Ndavi, Canyon Pathways brother that goes way back. Actually came to his first retreat prior to Canyon Pathways being birthed. We were still just kind of rallying guys to get away out of the grind and rest, and really inspiring conversation with Fred for a couple of reasons. You'll see and hear more of why that is as we get into it. But first, we're going to cover our topic for the episode. Our field note here is on invitation. Invitation. Every field note is a short, concise exploration of some aspect of living like a son and leading like a father. Something we've discovered out in the field and have put it into a note. And so all of those are available on our blog at canyonpathways.org. And here on the podcast, we review an audio version of it, sit with it, meditate upon it, let the Father reveal things to us as sons as we sit with the concept. And the concept here is invitation, an interesting one for a lot of reasons. It's at the origin, really central to the origin story of Canyon Pathways. It was late 2018. I had reconnected with two college friends who we're all in midlife. We're doing different things. We had found a way to find some synergy in some of the leadership and teaching and ministering that we were doing, and traveled to be with them, was invited to come into their community to speak and to share, and in that case also to screen the Heart of Man film. And out of that came a reconnection that was really deep, really profound, very, very quickly. In this case, guys I hadn't talked to in 10 or 15 years, but had really been closely connected in our early 20s, in those formative years. And as we sat together, we laughed harder than we had in a while, and we got real quick. And one of the things I said was, man, I'm burned out, just a lot going on, just the midlife stuff, tired, leading young children, kind of a season in marriage where we were dealing with some tension, trying to figure some things out, move through it, move through conflict, professionally in a role that I'd been in for a little while, and honestly was more in my working competencies than my gifts and core strengths, and that starts to take a toll. Some of you might be able to relate to that. You stay in a role for 5, 10, 15 years, and some things start to wear off, some exhaustion starts to set in, and if you're not in that correct spot, if you're pushing through where you got some skills and some competencies, but not in your sweet spot, that starts to wear you down as well, and you need rest. And I told these guys that. I say, hey, man, I'm just burned out. I mean, it's real burnout. I had some physical manifestations of burnout, and I need rest. And one of those guys said, hey, I've got this place, I've got this cabin, I've got this venue that I'd love to see be a place of rest and renewal, and it's open to you anytime. And that was the invitation. That was the invitation that catalyzed this Canyon Pathways community around the world. It was simple. It's just simple saying, hey, here's what I've got. You're invited to use it. Here's what I've invested in. You're invited to take advantage of it and to see some return on it personally. And that changes. And as we get into this field note here in just a second, you'll see why that is, but it really did something within me. We get into this stage of life. We're leading. We have so many demands on us. We're weary. Maybe we're wondering what's next. And we start to recognize one of the things we're missing is a lack of invitation. When you're young, there's a sense almost into the future of invitation. You're a child filled with wonder. You're in your teenage years. You're growing. You go off to school, off to college, into the workforce. It's new. You go into relationships. They're fresh. They're new. There's a sense of inviting. There's a sense of what might be. And then we hit a phase where that sense of invitation kind of wears off. The realities of that job, where at first you were wined and dined and recruited and interviewed, now you've been there a while. Maybe you've been there too long. Maybe there's change that's happened. Maybe there's been turnover. It's just not the same place. You don't feel invited. Maybe in those customer relationships, in those client engagements, not there anymore. Maybe in your personal relationships, in marriage. There's the initial phase of dating and courtship and wooing and the excitement of it and the invitation into union. And that doesn't last forever. And it starts to wear. And when it does, we might lose that sense of invitation altogether. We might be in relationships where there is no sense of invitation. And some of that might be because we grew up where there was not invitation. We grew up with a relationship with parents or in a household or a family of origin where there was precious little invitation. And we learned from an early age, we got to scrape by. We got to, everything we get, we're going to earn. Every table we get to, it's because we've put in the work and we've hustled and we've gotten there and we've gotten the acceptance, the admission, the place at the table. But it wasn't because of invitation. It was because we grinded, we put in the work, we earned it by the sweat of our own brow. We managed, sometimes we manipulated our way into it. And that's the life of a servant. It's not the life of a son. It's not the life of someone who is an heir and who is resting and receiving. And one of the things that heir is receiving is invitation to a table, invitation back, maybe after we've left, gotten up. So let's dive into this field note on invitation, see what the Spirit of the Father is revealing to us as sons. As my friend Fred says, as we'll hear from a little bit later on, we are sons among other sons. Let's see what the Father is saying to us as sons as we sit with this word and this concept of invitation. Recently, I was invited by a close friend of mine to attend his wedding. My immediate impulse was, of course, to respond, "We'll attend." The only obstacle, however, was not an insignificant one. The ceremony would be held 20 hours of air travel away in Kenya during a busy time on the family schedule. That invitation, though, was not the last. He quickly communicated again with a request that I not only attend, but participate in the ceremony as one of his groomsmen. As the formal invitation expanded, the sense of invitation I felt deepened. But it didn't end there. Next was an invitation to attend a retreat for the groom and groomsmen on a beautiful patch of earth with a view into the Great Rift Valley and, while there, play a role in cultivating a spiritual environment that would facilitate joy and vision as much as the physical environment facilitated awe and rest. In the end, this was not simply a printed request that I attend an event, but an intimate appeal to experience, together with brothers old and new, a joining of lives that went beyond just the bride and groom. And it gave me a new glimpse into the transcendence of invitation. Many of us experience precious little sense of invitation in our lives. Perhaps it's why the phrase, "you're invited," in a marketing or spam email can elicit as much power as it does throughout the general population. To be invited to something, anything, is to be seen, to be wanted, to be sought after in a world awash with rejection and isolation. An absence of invitation creates an environment of opposition, where everything, seemingly, must be earned, taken, scraped together, or wrestled apart. When we do not feel invited to a community, when we don't feel invited to a path paved, a place prepared, a promise protected, we experience the unceasing grind of simultaneously clawing for gain while clasping in defense. We scavenge for affirmation and identity, like so many hyenas and vultures jostling over a nearly picked clean carcass. And in such a state, the alluring though artificial invitation to the immediate and illicit often proves irresistible. We become vulnerable to anything on offer that will end our invisibility, that will eradicate the invalidation we fear and rage against. Without invitation, we are orphans, but the experience of sonship is one of continual and deepening invitation. To live as a son is to be invited continually into a relationship, into a mission, into an inheritance that is always accessible, yet never exhausted, always present, but never overbearing. It is to experience invitation, to return, to advance, to explore, to steward, without conditions, save one, that the invitation be accepted. And the invitation, whether we accept it straight away or not, changes us. It sparks something in our heart. I'm thought of and wanted, and our mind. Opportunities exist beyond what I can construct myself. Invitation, it turns out, is catalytic by nature. Our English word is derived from a Latin root meaning an incitement, a challenge. The Latin, in turn, incorporates an ancient root meaning to go after something, to pursue with vigor. To be invited is to be incited to something more, to be challenged to rise and go, to be pursued and presented with generosity. To live as a son is to live invited. To lead like the Father is to extend the invitation to others. When we lead like the Father, we invite others into our endeavors, just as He invites sons into His acts of creation. We invite others into our hopes and dreams as He invites sons into His purposes. We invite others to join us as He invites sons to walk with Him. We invite others to retreat with us as He invites sons into His rest. We invite others into our sorrows and pain as He invites sons into His sufferings. We invite others to return, no matter how long or far they have strayed, as He invites His sons back even from a far country. But only one living as a son, confident in the inexhaustible invitation around him, can, like the Father, extend invitation without fear, without hesitation, because unlike control, unlike compulsion and domination, invitation carries risk. It can be refused. It can be rejected. It can be dismissed and ignored in ways that will wound a fragile heart or crack a heart of stone. But when we ourselves accept invitation from the one who first invites us, we find we have the strength to invite others in, to incite, challenge, pursue those in our sphere who so desperately want to receive invitation from us. We find that we too can stand at the door and knock in invitation. And when we do, we'll be amazed at the doors that open. I will invite him to approach me, says the Lord, for who would dare to come unless invited? Jeremiah 30:21. There's our field note on invitation. And yeah, I got to say, this was a really fun one for me. Just so personally, so much discovery in it. This idea of invitation, being central, even fundamental to a sense of freedom, a sense of relationship, and then B, what it really represents, what it does to us, what being invited does within us, in our hearts, what it awakens, and what a lack of invitation maybe deadens over time in our hearts. That was really, really interesting to me. And that's what I love about doing these field notes. It's just an exploration. And, at heart, I love to explore places. I love to explore people's stories. But I also love to explore words. And these explorations lead to so many discoveries. And I love when the words come up. Our field notes are short, easily accessible essays, just a little note on something we're discovering in the Canyon Pathways community out in the field of midlife leadership as we live like sons and lead like fathers. And a lot of times it's me kind of stumbling across a word saying, it's such an interesting word. What's really going on there? That's, it might just be something about the word itself, the spelling, the sound. A lot of times what's interesting to me is a word that keeps coming up, either because it's important and there becomes this sense that there's something of import under the surface that we may not have eyes to see yet, that needs to be dug out, as it were. Or I'm also interested in words and phrases that just have become kind of hackneyed. It's like, it's so overused. I'm hearing this all the time. It's a good word. It's clearly being deployed by me and other people, but it's coming up a lot, and yet it's almost like it's lost meaning. It's like there's no flavor left. It's like, piece of sugar-free chewing gum. Like, it's awesome, and then all of a sudden I'm chewing it. I'm like, this is just rubber. What's going on? What do I even mean with this word? And then I started hearing other people use it, and it's used more frequently. I'm like, that's just annoying now. Let's breathe some life into this. So that's what leads to the explorations. Sometimes I just dive into something and pull it, and sometimes it comes from elsewhere in the Canyon Pathways community. I've had a lot of these field notes that we're looking at, a lot of words that we're discovering. Man, this is central to what living like a son of God is, what living like an heir is, not living like a servant or hired hand, living like one who is resting and receiving every day in life. This is a word that's important. And sometimes they get thrown at me. I mean, I've had a bunch of guys just say, this word's intriguing to me. I don't even know what it means. Or I'm using it a lot, but there might be something more. Here, dig into it. And then we go explore. So that's what we did here with Invitation. And really, really interesting. 3 main discoveries for me that were really exciting. Just want to highlight here. I'm sure you've got your own as you listened to that field note being read. But the first thing that jumped out at me was how little sense of invitation many of us have in this stage of our lives, in midlife leadership. That it is like that chewing gum that's just lost all flavor. It's just done. And we're just gnawing on it. Precious little sense of invitation in our life in this stage. And that absence creates an environment of opposition. That's a very interesting thought, that when we don't have a sense of invitation, all we have left is a sense of opposition, that everything's against us. Even the things that are invitations. That's maybe the difference between a true invitation and just an ask. Because we're getting asked a lot. We're getting always asked for time, for energy, for contribution of time, talent, or treasure. Lots of asks, but they just become demands on us. And we're just caught in this grind, in the midlife grind. We're just not doing anything out of joy and out of pleasure and out of discovery, but rather just to satisfy the ask that's been made of us, whether it's in the family or in the business or anywhere in our lives. And it creates a sense of opposition. That was really interesting to me. And it's become a gauge for me. Am I just feeling demanded upon? Am I just feeling drawn out of? And am I feeling like everything around me is opposed to me? Not really there for me to invite, to invest, to pour into? That's an important gauge. And it forces me to sit down and do what? Live as a son. Just rest and receive. Get away. Call that brother up. Get in that place where I can receive. Slow down the pace. Pull away. Retreat for a bit. Have the important conversation I need to have. Address it instead of just tolerating it or running away from it or avoiding it. That's become really, really important. So that was very interesting to me in this field note. And secondly, second takeaway for me and discovery in exploring this was that invitation is catalytic by nature, from this Latin root, this Latin word that literally means an incitement or a challenge. It's not just like, hey, come on over, you're invited. It's the invitation is doing something in me. It's sparking my heart and my mind. It's catalyzing something new or fresh or renewing something that was already there, but like a flame, it needed to be breathed upon. You get that the fire had dwindled and it's just embers, and I got to throw another piece of wood on it and breathe on it and blow on it. That's what this sense of invitation and invitation can do for us, especially when we feel like we don't deserve an invitation, like we don't deserve a spot at that table, in that place, in that relationship, in that position. That becomes a challenge for us, and that's what an invitation to a son from another son of the same father is going to do. It's going to incite something. And because part of it is because you feel pursued. That also is baked into that word, the root of the word invitation, that you've pursued something, that you are being pursued. Again, not seen, not wanted, not a castaway or rejected, but rather pursued, wanted, invited. That it's actually what the invitation does. And I've experienced it. And I kind of, explored that, how I felt invited. And it made something come alive. And it opened up possibilities. That's what invitation does. When we invite one another, when we invite our children into that moment, that experience, that conversation, into our lives, the good and the bad, when we invite our spouse into something new, when we invite a colleague, when we invite people to join us on that new thing, that new expedition, that new discovery, it does something. And then thirdly, just that this is part of our inheritance, that we can live in invitation, live in a sense, live in eternal invitation from a Father who loves us, who's covered us, who's redeemed us, who's filling us with the Spirit. But we can only continue in that. We can only invite others like the Father. We can only lead like a Father who's just spreading invitation all around him, to the table, to our lives, to our hearts and minds. We can only do that if we're living like a son of that Father, if we're continually ourselves living like a son by resting and receiving in his presence, so that the fruits of his Spirit, his life, are being manifest within and then outward from us. That's the only way we can do that. That's the only way we can do it. Otherwise, we're going to fall into our default. We're going to be weary. We're going to live like a servant. We're going to focus on control, compulsion, domination, convincing, instead of just inviting others into this opportunity, getting to know them in relationship and inviting them into a deeper relationship. Then we will be fruitful. Then we will be able to stand at that door. Even if that door has been slammed before, whatever that is, whatever that relational door is, we can, like the Son, stand at that door and knock and invite to the Father's table. We can do that when we're living like a son. We can lead like a father when we're living like the Son and are filled with the Spirit of sonship. Great takeaways from this field note on invitation. And I think just really becoming, even, for me, even more of a core concept, a tenet, a key indicator of living like a son and where I'm at in my sonship journey. All right, time to move into our sonship story segment. And in this episode, we're talking with my friend Fred Ndavi. Fred is originally from Kibwezi, Kenya, and he has an undergraduate degree and MBA from Dallas Baptist University. And he's the founder and executive director of Inspire Spaces, an incredible organization which has a mission of expanding educational opportunities primarily for rural students throughout Kenya through scholarships, transforming educational spaces through infrastructure development, and to inspiring young people through mentorship and leadership development. Fred's an incredible leader. It's been amazing to watch him build and lead that organization. He and his wife and daughter split their time between DC and Nairobi, and he and I go back about a decade now. And yes, Fred was the friend referenced in the field note. It was an amazing honor and experience to be invited to participate in his wedding and be a part of that moment and celebration in which the wedding party danced down the aisle toward the altar, and they still invited a Mzungu or white dude like me to participate. So it wasn't pretty, but it was special to be a part of and really deepened our friendship. And so to start our conversation here, I asked Fred, how has being a part of the Canyon Pathways community helped you in your sonship journey?
Living like a son there's a surrender effort or element. You have to learn to surrender, because living like a servant is controlling to make sure the outcomes, everybody, it's based on what you do. And living like a son is really accepting that there's nothing you can do that changes your position, your place on the table. You belong, and you can never be assigned too good to be, the best son. You're just a son. And, but living like a son is, the surrender effort is not even, because you have to trust God with a lot of things, and you have to trust community that He builds you also with a lot of things. That means you can do it on your own. So what this means for me, even in relation with Kenyan Pathway, is having to lean on my brothers, with very difficult issues, and being able to lean into their wisdom, trust them to walk with me, and also for me to trust myself with them, because we have shared values, shared, a shared mission. We have a kingdom outlook, and so I think that community for me then becomes a place to go to empty, but also to refill myself. Becomes a place that I can entrust a lot of issues and a lot of things with, and I think that's the beauty of that community. I think for me, moving forward, it's basically desiring men that want to live in that freedom, men that want to live in, they also want to live as surrendered sons, and not, that are serving just as servants, but serving as sons. It's men that want a better world around them, and they want stronger families, they want, great businesses, great countries. And part of that is then, how do we build that around each other? How do we spark each other, to excellence, because of the roots that we are planted, or we planted in each other. So I think for me, that's what, Kenyan Pathway looks like, and moving forward, and also this element of rest. We take for granted what rest. You see in Matthew, where Jesus would say, "Come to me, those that are weary, and heavy laden, and find rest in me, and I'll give you rest." And I think taking intentional moments and intentional rhythms that invite rest, that have a better way of leading from a place of rest and a place of being fulfilled. So I think Kenyan Pathway has given me that. I'm very intentional with the way I now I sleep. Very intentional with the way I spend my time. I still feel like I'm doing a lot of things, but I'm also very intentional with this element of rest, knowing that you can only lead in a great way when you're well rested.
The other thing about the intent, it blesses you. You're intentional in a new way in rest. When we're intentional, the overflow of that is that others will be blessed by it. Because I saw this in Naivasha at our Canyon Pathways retreat this year. We had a brother there who's in a leadership role in Nairobi, and he grew up, as we got to know each other, without a father. He grew up really, in the slums. And he said, in the slums, when you're growing up in the slums, here's the thing. Here's what you learn. You learn to be a hustler. That's what you do. That's your identity. You're a hustler, and you hustle, and you're always hustling. And he said, even in my leadership role, where I'm ministering to people now, he said, I'm realizing I'm still living like a hustler, but a hustler for God. He said, for the first time this week, I'm learning to be a son of God. And when you're a son, when you're truly living like a son, you're not a hustler. You're not hustling. You're receiving. You're resting and receiving. And that was powerful to me, because that has a very particular thing in the Kenyan context. It even, it's part of the political environment that, that's a mark. You're a hustler. And we see that, throughout the world in every culture. It's like, what do I got to do as a man? What do I got to do professionally? I got to hustle. What do I got to do as a father? I got to hustle and be a manager and a supervisor. No, When I live like a hustler, I'm just going to be a manager. When I live like a son, I'm going to lead like a compassionate father. And that is going to inspire. That is going to create invitation to people. That is going to be transformative. That was amazing, that moment that we shared at that retreat. Because, he was being transformed in that moment. But that story changed us. And that's what you're facilitating. That's what happens when we're sons among other sons. We lead each other like fathers. We provide covering and compassion for each other like a father.
Yeah. And we invite people into healing that they didn't know they needed it until they discover it. I think we invite people into this equally a discovery process that has such unique transformation for their families. I think we quit trying to score points, and we just now just enjoy the game. There's no heroes in this game. There's no this MVP. It's just we finished the race well because we rested well. We became attuned to our own weaknesses and our own inadequacies, and we then were able to respond without wanting to convince anyone out there. And I think a lot of people in ministry, in business, in philanthropy, we're trying to convince somebody somewhere. We have this almost a sales mindset that, we are doing good, we're doing better, we can do it better. And deep within ourselves, there's just an emptiness. I wonder why there's so much issues or cases of mental health, in our world today, whether it's in North America or it's even in, in the global South. And I think part of it is we're living in this external pressures that are forcing us into habits that are absolutely unhealthy. And so when we are leading, we're not leading from a place of, strength. We're leading from a place of fear. Now, when there's so much we're comparing ourselves with, but also we're living in fragile relationships because they are very transactional. And so, our hearts are not coming from a place of freedom. These are coming from a place of fear. Am I going to lose this? Am I going to lose this opportunity? Am I going to lose this job? What about my family? What about this? And everything just feels like, it's a hustle. Like you get it right now or you completely lose it. If you live in the slums and you live in the slum life is not, for the weak. You don't live in the slums and expect things to fall on your lap. You have to wake up every day and the streets are your enemy and a lot of things are your enemy. And you have to be alert. You have to be aware. You have to have your guard up. A little noise and you already know, what that, where that's coming from. You can easily tell the difference of the noise, like bullets, from guns getting fired in your dreams and somebody dropping something somewhere in your dreams because you're so tuned in into what's around you. And I think for me, when I listen to a lot of brothers that have come to Kenyan Pathway and they come in with huge expectations. Oh man, the schedule, what are we going to do? What do you mean there's not a schedule? What do you mean there's not a schedule? Good Lord, what am I, how do we then find, how do we know what we're going to do? And then by the end of the first day, you can see their guards are dropping and they're like, wait a second, you mean I could have rested this much? You mean, is it actually, it's even possible to be, and I think what people are realizing is, why haven't been running? And part of it, I've just been running aimlessly. Second, I'm carrying burdens that I don't need to carry. Because when you rest, you know the weight you're carrying, and there's even the right weight that you're carrying. So from a place of rest, you can define things much better. And I think that's what a lot of people come to discover. A lot of the brothers are like, wait a second. I am not going back to those old habits. I don't need to, So I mean, I really enjoy our experiences and even just sitting back to listen. Because even the other thing that happens is you have people that just were tapping into pains and wounds that are so current and they haven't talked to anyone about. You have not rested long enough to begin to address these wounds and pains. And for the first time, you hear somebody say, man, I think we're going to go through a divorce, or we're going through a separation. I think I'm losing my family. Or I think I don't even know what's going to happen with my job, and it's like their fears finally catch up to that. And now they have to face them. You have to come into that, realization that this is not going anywhere and you have to face it. So what I've loved is just sitting back and seeing this idea of people that have been running so much, and finally they have to pause, they have to stop, and everything is catching up.
So how has that sonship journey deepened through being an inviter now of others to Canyon Pathways?
I think the beauty of being a son among other sons is you don't have to put up a show. You don't have to act, sons are brothers, and you understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. You understand each other's shortcomings. And so there's never a need to put up a show. And I think for a lot of men, this is a place that we fall short of, just the idea of being ourselves among each other. And to fully live as a son among sons is to say, I have failed, I have fallen short, I have missed the mark, I have not made it. I'm not who I thought I would be. I'm not anything that they say I am. I am just what you see, and this is me. And it's almost this idea of take it or leave it, but it's not. I'm not gonna put makeup on this. This is what it is, and there's so much beauty in that, because it takes a lot of weight from us. There's expectation from men or from the world that we lead our families and lead them with excellence. We lead organizations and businesses and churches and relationships, and we lead them with excellence. And anything short of that, you're not good enough, or there's just this thing, you're failing. They might not tell you you're not good enough, but you're failing. And then I come to realize that, you find a group of brothers that can speak openly without having to, sugarcoat or pretend about, the rhythms of their lives and how they're struggling right now. If you find that group of people, it's probably the most life-giving group of people you can be around, more than even, a church Sunday or service on a Sunday, because this is truth lived out. And so in Kenya, what then has become, for us, and especially Kenyan Pathways, an extension of this sons among sons, my friends, that we are now invited in a space where we can continue to have these open conversations about our lives. And when it's happening during the retreat, or even way past the retreat, we can call on each other and just say, talk about difficult things, but because there's freedom in that conversation, there's freedom in the way we know each other. So from the first time, from being invited to now inviting people, there's just been this desire for me to create more communities where I have men that we can lean on each other, we can have honest conversation, and just, we don't have to put a knot. So I find that to be more exciting for me in this season and in the next season of my life, finding men that are rooted, men that are seeking authenticity, freedom, and they come as they are. So yeah, that's what Kenyan has been doing for me.
Your Canyon word is inspire. you've received it and you continue to receive it through your Monday, through the emails, your word. How has the word inspire been, how has the Father been speaking to you through that?
Inspire means a lot of things for me, because a lot of my work is in the trenches, or with people that are in the trenches of darkness and in places where there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of, waiting and wanting, and this, God, when will you show up? When will this change? And why does it have to be like this? So it's people that have been lamenting, and they feel like they've been lamenting ever since they saw the sun, and they're still lamenting today and asking God, does it always have to be this way? And so I think for me, the word inspire is not just to cheer people on into this academic excellence, or cheer people on into this social excellence, or professional excellence, but it's really to cheer them out of darkness. It's to illuminate places where they are, where it feels like it's been dark too long, and can you inspire hope? Can I, ignite hope for them so that tomorrow looks far better than it's been for far too long? So I think that word inspire is to, to look at people that have been wounded, for a long time, and give them a different definition of their scars, to tell them that this doesn't always have to pay, to point to your wounds only, but it can also point to your overcoming, and what you're able to go through, and you're able to achieve, because of this belief in a God who's redeeming, and God who does not waste our pain and waste our wounds. And so I think for me, inspire continues to be this. It doesn't fit one mold, or it doesn't fit one definition of just cheering people out of things, but it's really also bringing that hope for people in very difficult places, or people that are standing in what feels to be a cliff, and to tell them, it doesn't always have to be this way. So it's I wear it with a lot of weight, or I take that word with me with a lot of weight, because then I deal with people that carry so much weight with it. And I know that it's not, it's not one of those inspire songs like a nice, easy thing. It's like, yeah, you can do it. You've got this. But for me, it's bigger than that. It's going to the woundedness, and listening to people's pain, and sitting there long enough to relate with their, emptiness, and then being able to then grab hold of them and tell them, there's a path out of this. And the inspiration in that is to give them, energy in their body, to tell them, let's take a step at a time, and out of this woundedness, out of the strangers you're in, there's a path forward. And 2 years down the line, 4 years down the line, we look back and we see this generation of young men and women, or friends that have said, remember that day we had this conversation. Remember that time you came and sat in our homestead right outside this mad house, and you sat right on those logs, and I didn't know what tomorrow was going to look like, but you made me believe. You made me see tomorrow, even when there wasn't, a clear path through it. And so that's how I see God using that word in my life, the true redemptive efforts, to give people a reason to continue to hope, to continue to believe, to continue to hang on.
Really inspiring stuff from Fred Ndavi. To know Fred is to feel invited into what he's doing, into his friendship, into his trust, into what he's going to do and accomplish, into his vision. It's to feel connected. And that invitation creates inspiration. It's what he does, and it's what I aspire to, that level of invitation and inspiration. And I'm constantly both challenged and given a vision by my friend Fred of what that can look like. And I hope you sensed it too as we listened. I loved what he said, that we are inviting people into healing they didn't even know they needed, and into freedom that they didn't even know was possible. That sums up the Canyon Pathways community, the Canyon Pathways mission, the vision, and the table that our community represents, being invited into the sonship to live and experience the freedom and joy of living like a son of God is what we are all about. And so I hope you were inspired as I was by that, and I hope you enjoyed this whole episode. Share it with people in your network and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Also, check out the show notes. We've got links to a couple places, as well as a PDF with reflection questions. You can use this episode for personal reflection or in small group gatherings with others as we continue to develop a language of sonship through this pod and gather stories from men in midlife leadership around the globe. Thanks to the team at Maroon Harpoon for producing this episode, and a lot of gratitude, as always, to our donors who make the Canyon Pathways community possible. And as always, thank you for listening and for being a part of the Canyon Pathways community as we together live like sons and lead like fathers.